Hello, everyone. I am 4Beats here with Benji, bringing you the Aegis and Cheese, a new podcast occurring every major DOTA event, breaking down the headlines before, during, and after the action takes place. Let's jump into the first phase picks.
All right, so first phase picks. First of all, in this upcoming major, we're going to see teams No Ping and Beast Coast representing SA, two teams that were previously absent from the last major, where Thunder Predator, who unfortunately couldn't make the cut this time around, placed much higher than any expected going into the event. With EG also getting a respectable second at the Singapore major, the question is, should slots for SA and NA teams be expanded going forward? Beats, your thoughts?
I think the simple answer is yes. I think this has been the consensus among people in the scene for a while. I think their performance, specifically South American team performance, not just at the Singapore major, but at pretty much every major Dota event they've been invited to, the results speak for themselves. They're able to show up. They don't get first, but they show up and they get a respectable placement, and they take down some of the biggest teams in the world. And this has been consistent since like 2015. And that has only happened as a result of them getting more invites and being involved in the scene more and developing. I would also like to point out that a lot of people say that the North American talent pool is dwindling. But I actually think the talent pool has been growing over the years, not just with like tier 3 teams, lower division teams, but at the top as well. I think if you were to say a couple of years ago that a team of CCNC, MSS, Yawar would be taking games off of VG, I think people would look at you funny. But now that's just not the case. I mean, we have two really competitive teams, a third fairly competitive team with Tomato, who is pretty firmly in NA now on Undying. So yeah, I think it's time. Benji, your thoughts?
I can say I 100% agree. Do you want to go into one of your points there, which was SA's major international event performance? Got to look at Singapore major, most recent event. Thunder Predator, can't ignore their performance. 12-2 in the group stage. That's 12-2 against some of the best teams in the world, mind you. In a bracket stage, they have wins over Asta, who just finished first place in China DPC, VP, who just finished first in CIS DPC, and they lost to eventual major winners IG 2-1. So they took a map off of the winners of the Singapore major. Also, Quincy Crew. I mean, maybe a bit more of an understated performance, but 7-7 group stage, and at the beginning of the group stage, many people, I think they were something like 4-2. Like, people thought that this was going to be Quincy Crew's tournament. Unfortunately, didn't quite pan out, but also remember they were playing with a stand-in, didn't have MSS, had to play with Polison. Take you a little bit further back, going back to TI9, we had Infamous, who are now Beast Coast. Their performance was incredible, finishing 7th, 8th, even though before that event, many people doubted SA getting one slot, and we're currently coming up on TI, and there is a pretty big possibility that we're going to have 4 SA teams at the event, which is fantastic. I think that, there's no question in my mind that NA and SA should have wildcard slots, and I don't know why they didn't have one to begin with.
I completely agree. I would also point out that to kind of further this, that these teams only get better and they only get more competitive by showing up and competing. That's really the only way that can happen. So more expansion is good for the scene overall, I think.
Yeah. Also, the fact that China and Europe get 2 slots, not too on board with that. You can't really judge a region's power at this point. So but. Enough said about that. Let's move on to the next topic.
That sound means it's time for us to move on to the next topic. So let's get into it. Liquid went 5-2 over this second DPC season, good enough to secure a group stage spot at the upcoming ANA Major, an improvement over their wildcard placement last season. They also have a slightly different roster from last season, as Boxy has had to take leave due to some undisclosed personal issues. They brought in Sumail as a stand-in to play in the mid lane in Boxy's absence. The question being, is Sumail the main reason for Liquid's improved performance this season?
Okay, so, you look at Sumail, there's no secret that this guy is one of the best mid laners in the world. And that's been that way for a long time. I know he hasn't been on a team so much this season, but, this guy won a TI when he was 16 years old. This guy is one of the best mid laners Dota has ever seen. And he's been fantastic this season. He's played, his Lesh has been super impressive, his Puck, he's played a lot of different heroes and he's been very impressive for Liquid. But for me, he has not been the most impressive player on Liquid this season. That, for me, has been Koikva. Now, Koikva is obviously a mid player. He has played a bit of offlane back in the day, but not any time recently. And he has moved into the offlane role to accommodate for Sumail, and he's been absolutely fantastic. I think if you dumped 90% of mid laners currently in the scene into the offlane role, they wouldn't do nearly as well as Quickver's done. And I think a lot of that is due to how Liquid sets up their team. For example, they love to flex heroes. They love to switch around, put Mickey in the mid lane, put Boxy on more of a farming offlane and have him play more of the carry role. But, it can't be understated how well and how good it reflects on Koikver that he's able to move into the offlane, a position that, he has not played in years, and still be competing at a world-class level. I think it's so impressive.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, because I think this is one of the real strengths of Liquid as a team is their ability to be flexible, and it really reminds me of when you had the old Liquid lineup where you had Matumba Man, who would kind of switch between being a mid laner and being a safe laner with Miracle, and I think that flexibility is an undervalued aspect of high-level Dota that I wish more teams would pull out a little more, because it allows you to do so much more with the draft. I mean, Liquid, on top of being just a really good team, they put a lot of emphasis on the draft. I mean, I think that's part of the reason they have 2 coaches. They might even have 3 coaches if there's a situation where Boxy comes back and Sumail wants to stick around. So, yeah, I think it's furthers the point that flexibility is a good thing to have on a team. And it also shows just the strength of this team as a team, not just as individual players, but to have the ability to bring someone else in and immediately acclimate them to the team environment and perform well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I would like to say is I would like to see some teams try to focus on Koikver a little bit more. I mean, we haven't seen him play that many heroes, and I think that's sort of a function of he is a mid laner. They didn't get extensive time to prep. This change happened mid-season. So he's been playing Slardar, Sand King, Magnus, I think. So I would like to see some teams try and sort of ban out some of those heroes, force him onto maybe a hero that he's not so comfortable with. But, I have no doubt that even on a hero that he's not 100% comfortable with, he's still able to pull out a world-class performance. All right, so next.
Okay, moving on.
So in the build-up to the Singapore major, it's not this major, but in the build-up to the last major, many people in the scene were speaking on how they didn't really think the results from the unfortunately nicknamed COVID major were going to be as meaningful as an event that was free from the same issues. So my questions to you, Beats, first of all, were they wrong? And second of all, does this major mean a little bit more than the Singapore major?
Well, Benji, this is something that I think you and I have talked about before, and I think we kind of have differing opinions on it. But I kind of think that the idea that last major performances weren't as meaningful because of the pandemic and all the issues surrounding that, teams not showing up. I think it was a little overblown, and if anything, I actually think it might even reflect on some of the strength of the teams that placed highly, that they were able to kind of work under these extreme circumstances. And I say extreme circumstances, they were just like, chilling in a room playing Dota. But it was different than a standard LAN. I mean, it feels different. There's not an audience there, and they still showed up and performed well. Maybe you could say that puts less pressure on the teams, but I think it's an aspect that shouldn't be ignored. But at the same time, I think it's wrong to say that those are somehow less meaningful. And even if you do think that, I mean, this major is the chance to prove me wrong. I mean, maybe EG will get last. Maybe IG will get last this major. I mean, there's a chance IG does get last. So does this major mean something more? I think my answer right now is maybe. We'll just have to wait and see. Your thoughts?
So I think the main point here is that is the teams absent from the previous major. I think the fact that it seems like, I think the China flight situation has now been resolved. It seems like all of the teams are going to be at this major, and I think that gives it maybe slightly more legitimacy than the Singapore major. I think the Singapore major, unfortunately, we had some big teams I would have loved to see there. Na'Vi, Beast Coast, some of these teams I would have loved to see how they stack up against international competition, and we didn't get to see that because of COVID, but now, obviously, Na'Vi aren't going to be there. That's a whole separate topic that we might get into at some point. But Beast Coast, these teams that have potential to cause upsets on a global stage, I'm excited to see how they're going to perform and how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, although I think last major performances were still impactful and still meant something, there is an aspect to this major that I was excited for the last major because it was the first Dota event we had in like a year, but I am excited in a different way for this event, just because of I think the South American aspect of it is really big to me. Seeing two teams that we have not seen on LAN before this year showing up is really exciting to me. As an NA fan, seeing Quincy Crew fielding a full roster, I hope brings an air of legitimacy to Quincy Crew's success in the region, and maybe can even make it so that they're seen as the best in the region, as opposed to EG. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to here. Just to kind of go into it a little. Oh, never mind. Hey, moving on to the next topic. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about this because it is the news of the day, I guess. Well, I guess it's the news of yesterday. But Alliance were the most disappointing team by far at the Singapore Major, crashing out of the group stage, but bounced back during DPC Season 2 on their way to a 6-1 record and top of the Western Europe DPC standings, giving them a playoff spot at the upcoming major. During the season, however, they were found out to be using a coach relaying information to the team during the game, and soon after that, it came out that ESL and DreamHack had altered the rules to allow for this prior to the season. Much discussion was had, but the question is, should in-game coaches be allowed in Dota? Benji, your thoughts?
Now, listen, I think we both agree on this here. I don't think I'm going to be saying anything too controversial when I say that in-game coaches should absolutely not be allowed in Dota. Now, it's a difficult topic to sort of circumvent because, a lot of different esports have coaches, or have had coaches during the game. I know that Counter-Strike had that for a long time. You had coaches, relaying information to the team during the game. But Dota is such a different game to Counter-Strike. I think it's a lot about the individual and how the individual sort of sees the game, reads the game, what kind of, there's so much stuff to keep track of in Dota, buybacks, vision, smoke time, there's so much. And I think having a coach there to maybe remind you of these things if you didn't pick up on it, I just don't think it's good for the game. I think the game should be, a measure of individual skill, not how well your coach is able to pick up on, someone else's buyback timing or stuff like that. I love Alliance. A really big fan of this team. We talked about it before the last major. Unfortunately, they didn't really do that well. But big fan of Alliance. Big fan of PPD as well. I don't think they were in the wrong here at all. We should probably get that across. The wrong or the blame here should definitely be put on ESL and DreamHack. All Alliance were doing is just following the rules that were set out to them. But I absolutely think that there's not much. I don't think there's any place for coaches in Dota, and I don't really like that ESL and DreamHack have just put these changes in without asking anyone about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. The question I kind of want to pose to you, which I think is interesting, is what degree of separation should there be from public matchmaking to professional play? Because I think the argument that is often made is that there are only 5 positions on a team in Dota. That is what Valve has set up. You have 5 roles, you have 5 players. However, Valve has given coaches a lot more options in public matchmaking to do things. And I guess my question is, where's the separation? Is the separation simply just that pro Dota is different than public Dota, like public matchmaking Dota, and the rules should be different? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think pro Dota is not pub Dota. I think that's that's not really a difficult bridge to cross. I think we shouldn't be saying, because we have this in pub Dota, it should be in the pro scene. No, I think the two are very different entities, and I think it should stay that way. I don't think we should be making concessions in Pro Dota to account for stuff that we have in pubs. I think they're two completely different things. They're played completely separately. But I also, there's also the aspect of it is like you hone your skills in pub matches for Pro Dota, but at the end of the day, they are completely different things, and I think they should be treated as such.
Okay, so this section is called Chain Lightning. We're going to be going through all the topics in this section rapid fire, finishing up with the wild cards. Each one of these is going to have a 1 minute 30-second timer, and we get to the wild cards. We're going to do a full 3 minutes on that. Starting off.
Okay, so first of all, Quincy Crew and EG, two pretty much best teams in A. How do you see them placing at this upcoming major?
Okay, so in my heart of hearts, I think what everyone expects me to say is that I expect Quincy Crew to take EG 3-2 in the grand finals of the event. However, I think if I have to give a real prediction, I would say that despite Quincy Crew beating out EG, and this is a topic I'm going to be talking about a little further on in the show, I think EG might be the stronger team on LAN. I think they have a little more experience on LAN, and I think Quincy Crew beating them could be a result of some interregional metas coming to show their face, because we know how EG plays against all these top teams. Quincy Crew is a bit of a rogue element. They didn't have their full roster. So I could see EG taking a solid top 3. That's kind of the place they've been in consistently throughout their career. And Quincy Crew, I could see them in the middle of the pack somewhere. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think an interesting point about this is that Quincy Crew are going to be in the upper bracket. They're going to be starting in the upper bracket, obviously with that first place. And I think a lot of it depends on their first round matchup. I think if they get a pretty good draw there, I think I could see them, that obviously if they win their first round matchup, that guarantees them top 6 at least. EG going to be in the group stage, but I think they're experienced enough and good enough to be able to navigate that group stage, and I think more likely than not they make the upper bracket. Obviously you've talked about EG starting slow in the past, so maybe we see that in only 4 days of group stage. Most of your games are going to be played within the first 2 days. Maybe EG don't get off to a good start, but I see both of these teams getting probably at least a top 8 finish.
Alrighty, that means it's time to move on. So, is TNC's success a result of their recent roster changes? Benji, your thoughts?
Okay, so if people didn't know, TNC, they finished a decent first season. Probably not what they would have hoped for. Didn't make the major, but this season they They kicked KP and Febby, bringing 2 Tagalog players in their place, and it's not Tagalog, sorry, Philippines, so that they could speak Tagalog, communicate in Tagalog instead of having to speak English. And they've done very well. Finished second in this SEA DPC. Their only big loss was, I think, to Lil Gun, who went something like 0-6 against all the other teams. But you see some faces in there: Gabby, Armel, Tims. Tims is for a while was considered one of the best 4 players in the world. So really excited to see this team. A lot of familiar faces in it, along with Bok and Boomy, who are the 2 new players. Maybe this communication issue will be the hump that they get over to finally, maybe grab a top 8 finish or top 6, and secure their spot at TI. Beats, your thoughts?
I think this isn't the first time a team has done this, actually, to kick players in order to speak a consistent language. A lot of people might not know this, but before TI3, when Eternal Envy, NA's last hope, was playing on Alliance, he was kicked before the International to bring on, I think it was EGM, and I'll just do this very quickly. It was brought on. They brought in EGM so they could have a full Swedish-speaking lineup, and it obviously worked. I mean, they won, so yeah.
Yeah. All right, next topic, and move through these very quickly. Can we expect Asta to outperform their previous results now that they'll have a full roster? Beats, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so last major they didn't have Baboka there for some Monka-S reasons. But and I think Baboka is one of the stars on this team. I think if you were to look at the Aster lineup, I think if you were someone like me, just to be honest here, who doesn't watch a lot of Chinese Dota for time zone reasons, if you were to just take a look at Astra's lineup, you would look at them and be like, oh, I know this name. I know Baboka. This is, a star player, a standout player. And he has a lot of fans, not just in China, but around the world. So not seeing him there was very disappointing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people assumed that they could have performed a lot better had he been there. And I think their performance in interregional play speaks to that a lot because they look good. I mean, they finished 6-1, I believe, in the region, and they're looking to show up and they're looking to win. Benji, your thoughts?
Yeah, completely agree. Borax, one of my favorite players, or Baboka, however you want to. He has changed his username to honor Jerax, I think.
Really, that's awesome.
Another from one full player to another, but. Yeah, I think he's one of the best talents, one of the best forward positions in the world, or at least he was considered that at some point. Apparently, the reason that he missed last major is not as uncommon as you might think. Apparently, it happens a lot. He was just unfortunate to get caught, so make of that what you will. But really like this team, really like them, their chances of securing a high placement, especially with them starting in the upper bracket.
All right, so moving on, PSG LGD, the secret of Chinese Dota. Benji, your thoughts?
Okay, so I take a little bit of exception to this one. I don't think they're too much of a secret, LGD obviously been one of the premier organizations in China for almost the entirety of Dota's existence. You remember back to the times with Zhao Wei at the helm. He's also now at the helm as captain, or as coach, I should say. And then obviously you remember TI8, TI9, two great finishes there. Unfortunately, couldn't secure that elusive TI win, but this is still a very strong team. Of course, not the same team as their TI8 and TI9 roster. Arme is still there, but the rest of the roster has been retooled, taken out. And I know you're very high on this team, but yeah, really love this team. I think Nothing to Say has been a revelation in the mid lane. Arme is obviously still one of the best players in the world. Jinkyu making the transition from off lane, I think he's worked really well, and yeah, really impressed with this team. I'll let you say a couple of words about them because I know you're very high on them.
I love this team. They're one of my favorite teams to watch. I think part of that might have to do with kind of that like X-Wings gaming fairy dust that might be sprinkled on them a little bit with two of their players. And I think this team, you mentioned it, it's a different roster than their TI roster, but I think it's a better roster. That's nothing against the players who used to be on the team, but I think Ame, he's stuck around. He's super stable, and I think bringing in, they've brought in some younger talent, but also brought in some talent with some accolades as well. So I think I would say that they are the secret of China. I'm just gonna say it here. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Beats.
Yep.
Next up. Everyone's been asking the question, just how good is South America? Can you answer it for us?
No, I cannot. But I have thought about it. So again, this is another thing I'm going to bring up later, but how much does interregional play affect performance on LAN? And I think, so South America, you have three teams coming to the event. You have two teams coming to the event. You have Beast Coast and you have No Ping. And there's also the question of these two teams beat out Thunder Predator, who performed significantly better at the previous major than people expected. So by the transitive property, does that mean that these two teams should perform better than Thunder Predator performed at that event? And I think the answer to that question is maybe. It's a tough thing to answer. I think Beast Coast especially, I would expect them to show up. I would expect them to possibly even get a pretty high placement despite having to go through the group stage. No Ping is kind of the rogue element that I can't see. I've watched a lot of their games. They look strong. I'm not going to say they don't look strong. But they're an unknown entity when it comes to international play. Whereas Beast Coast, we've seen them perform before. Benji, your thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, just quickly, I know the time is pretty low, but first of all, I want to run you through these teams' percentages to qualify for TI. Beast Coast, 99.6%, they're almost guaranteed. Thunder Predator, 88.5%, but their fate is out of their hands. They need to rely on some of the teams who haven't quite secured their spot, not really performing at this major. And then also No Ping, 57.2%. They need top 6. And if they get a good upper bracket match, that's just their first upper bracket series. If they win that, that's top 6. So we could be seeing 4 SA teams at the major, at TI, that So yeah, I think South America is pretty good. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I fully agree. Moving on. Is this T1 team in some way better or more refined than last season's? And by last season, I mean last major. Benji, your thoughts?
Okay, so I think having the ability to play with 23 Savage for a little bit longer has been very good for this T1 team. I think the more that you play with the player, obviously, the better it's going to be. Maybe you kind of rely on the honeymoon period a little bit, but I think for the most part, once you play with the player more, you get a little bit more comfortable. And this is a team that is built around 23 Savage. Everything they do is to sort of get him farm and make him win the game. But I actually don't think he's the key element for T1 here. I think you can rely on 23 Savage to get his, right? He was top 2 in GPM, XPM kills, least deaths, and KDA in SEA DPC. I think the rogue element here is Cuckoo. Carl's a pretty reliable mid laner, but Cuckoo is a very up and down off laner. One game he looks like the best off laner in the world. The second game he doesn't look like the best off laner in the world. I think they're going to need him on absolute top form to be able to have success at this major.
Yeah, I think if T1 maybe were to go back, they may have decided to keep their stable roster for that major, and maybe have 23 Savage come in a little later, because they looked like a team that was playing with a new roster at that event, even if it was just one player. This was not the T1 that I was expecting to show up. I was really high on that team going into the wild cards and was embarrassed by their performance. So I'm really hoping, to see this better T1 team, and I think they can do it. So very excited for that.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Moving on to the wild cards. I'm just gonna pull up the timer real quick here. Okay.
3 minutes for all the wild cards.
3 minutes for all the wild cards on the clock. We're gonna start with you, Benji. ASM Gambit.
Okay, so first of all, ASM Gambit. I don't know if you've seen the recent CIS shuffle, but they've lost two of their strongest players in Seneko and No One. In my opinion, they're their two strongest players. They brought in Lorinov and BZZ as stand-ins for the major. Not sure if that's permanent, but those are two players who have been playing lower division Eastern Europe. So they couldn't even find upper division Eastern Europe as stand-ins. Even with No One and Seneko, I don't think they were that impressive this DPC season. I give them a 10% chance of making it through the wildcards. All right, next up, who we got? Execration. Beats, give me your thoughts on them.
Execration, a team that I might offend some people here. I don't think they're gonna show up to this event. I think, again, kind of foreshadowing, I think this is a team that got to this event off of the back of really good interregional play. I don't think that'll transition them into good international play. We will see what happens. There's the element of surprise there. There are some good players here. This is a kind of an org that has seen success internationally in the past. But yeah, I just don't see it here. I would give them also like a 10%, maybe even a 5% chance of making it out of here. So yeah, let's move on to Nigma. Benji.
Okay, so Nigma have looked better this season, in my opinion, with the addition of ILTW and moving Miracle to mid. I think that's his home. That's where he made his name. But they haven't looked incredible. They haven't made the leap, I think, from obviously their pretty embarrassing placement last season or last major. And obviously, you look around at the wildcard, there are a few strong teams in here that I think are more likely to move on than Nigma. So I would give them probably 30% chance tops. All right, next up, IG. Okay. Major winners. Beats, your thoughts?
IG, I think, China, obviously. This is the team that won last major. They beat EG with a reverse sweep. They look strong. I think Emo is one of the he's one of the best players in Dota right now. I don't think that's very disputable. He looks very stable when he plays, even in games where they're behind. So I think this team is going to look good on the back foot. The only thing that might come into play here is this is one of the younger teams in China. Compared to other teams. And I think the experience that a team like Vici brings to the table, or a team like Nigma or Secret, it can't be understated. This is something that does help you, especially in a wild card position where you're under the gun, you're under pressure. So I give them a pretty high chance. I would give them maybe 60% to make it out, which is pretty high.
Okay, yeah.
So let's move on to Vici.
Okay, Vici finished third in, as you mentioned, extremely competitive China TPC. They did lose a second place tiebreaker to PSG LGD as well, so they were tied for that second place. Didn't win the tiebreaker, didn't fall their way, whatever. They've been here before, though. They made it out of the wildcard last major, if you remember, and went on to finish 7th, 8th. So that's, a lot of games that they played. Oh, gosh.
It's okay, I can do secret really quickly.
I expect them to more than likely repeat that success, give them 65% chance to make through. Give me 10 seconds on the final team, which is Team Secret.
Team Secret, gonna make it out of the wild card. I give them a 70% chance. Team Stable, you got Puppy. He's not gonna let it happen. So, yeah, there you go.
I like that. Okay, so that was a little bit stressful. Let's go on to something a little bit more calm. We got the Cooldown here, and Beats, you've got a topic that you want to discuss. Why don't you introduce it for us?
Yeah, I've been foreshadowing it a little bit throughout the show so far. That is, how much does interregional play affect performance on LAN? And kind of what I mean by this is, you see teams that might seem like they're going to be really strong coming into the event because they get a really high placement in their region, and then they show up to the event and they underperform. What's up with that? And I posit that part of it is that interregional metas can kind of develop throughout the course of the season because these teams aren't participating in international lands, and this could just be something that plagues this year in particular. With COVID, with less third-party tournaments that are able to do international play, and so there's kind of a situation you have is where you have a patch come out, and then the only practice you're getting on that patch is with other teams in your region. And in the case of Europe, it's Western Europe and Eastern Europe because they do scrim against each other. In North America, they do also play. EG has said that they play against South American teams as well. And compared to Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, I would posit that South America's meta and the way South American teams play is different enough that I do think you are getting something more out of it by playing those teams rather than, say, like Team Liquid playing like Virtus Pro. You're getting kind of a different perspective on the patch. And this is something that teams have brought up too. It's not just me. I'm not just talking out of my ass here too. But last major we saw Liquid and Alliance both underperform despite playing pretty well in their region. And Blitz suggested that part of that reason was that they had the wrong idea on the patch. They were just scrimming either themselves or Eastern European teams, and they thought the patch was way, way faster than it actually was. So it led to a situation where they came into the event with the wrong idea. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what you think on that.
So I think that's a good point there. Because I heard the same thing from Blitz, like sort of they played these Eastern European, Western European teams, and the meta in those scrims was definitely right. Whoever plays faster wins, and then you get to the major, you go against teams like these SA teams, these SEA teams who play fast all the time. Like that's their whole meta. Their whole thing is that they play fast. So when you try and sort of put that up against them, they know how to deal with it because they play against that all the time. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think, these EU teams underperformed because they only scrimmed against their own region. Because, I'm sure most teams only scrimmed within their region. I think it was just the luck of the draw, as in what they thought was good wasn't. I don't think it's a particular weakness. I don't think if you scrim, interregionally, I think that's the right word. I don't think that's always a bad thing. I think sometimes it'd be a good thing. You find something, you find a meta that other teams haven't thought about, and it kind of counters a lot of their strategies. But I think in this case, it definitely didn't help. And I don't want to be making excuses for EU. Obviously, they didn't do very well, and I'm sure they'll put pressure on themselves to do a lot better at this major, and I certainly expect them to. But I think there's a something to be said there for it not necessarily being a bad thing, but I think it can't hurt to, scrim with teams from different regions. But obviously with COVID, it's not that easy.
Hearing you talk about it, it reminded me a little bit of something that's been brought up a lot more in the past couple of years of Dota that I don't remember ever being said in the early years of Dota as an esport, was the idea of teams coming into the major with a plan. This is something that I've heard, because I've been watching so much NA Dota, I've heard Fly talk about a lot as the captain on EG, is them being anxious that their ideas coming into the event weren't the correct ideas. And then kind of having this moment as they were winning, that a sense of relief that they were correct. And I think that's something I never heard really mentioned for a long time. Almost the idea of like figuring out the patch is much of a aspect. I mean, it always has been, but it's more said out loud a lot more now. We're figuring out the patch is as much an aspect of being a good team as just like playing well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the legitimization, or the fact that Dota has now become this event where it is now can be considered a professional sport. And I think a lot of teams are sort of taking that next step in terms of, I say taking, they have been taking for a while the next step in terms of preparation and studying and being ready for an event, because it is now a job for these guys. Whereas maybe in the early days of TI1, TI2, TI3, TI4, it wasn't. You had TI, which was your big prize pool and could change your life, but all the other events were paled in comparison, and people weren't getting paid full salaries. Nowadays, it's a lot. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a lot better in terms of teams are getting sponsorships, teams are getting annual salaries, and they can afford to take it a bit more seriously in terms of let's make sure we are doing everything we can in terms of trying to prepare and trying to spend as much time on being as prepared as you can be for the upcoming event. And I think I think if you're not doing if you're not doing enough preparation, and also if you're not doing the correct preparation, you're going to fall behind, because there are so many other teams who are. And I think the sort of how EU teams and Eastern European teams and Western European teams performed at the last major was not as a result of not doing enough preparation. I think it was perhaps not doing the right preparation, and also just getting a little bit unlucky.
Was that a bottle?
What was that?
I heard a loud spring coming from your mic.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't hear anything. Sorry.
It's okay. It was just kind of funny. It was like a comic noise out of a cartoon.
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to know what you think about this idea. So say Valve next season keeps the same system in place, where you have these interregional. I think many people think that they will, where you have this interregional league that goes on to like a bigger event. Maybe they add minors. A couple of things people have been suggesting. But given that, do you think there might be some value in teams maybe hiring on maybe an analyst or like another coach that their job is just to watch other regions and kind of see what's working and what's good? Because that's a full-time job. That is not something that your coach could do or just a player could do. I mean, it's a lot of that is a lot of work. I can tell you just from experience, just watching one or two regions the entire time, trying to catch every game it's a big part of every night that you have. So yeah, I'd be curious to know. It's not
just watching the game as well. It's sort of analyzing it, taking it apart, maybe doing a lot of analysis after all the games have been played about what hero was good, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But while I do think that's a good idea, I think there's nothing that is more effective than just playing scrims. I think that you can do all of the replay analysis you want. You're not going to get there's nothing that's going to be better in terms of preparation than playing against these teams, figuring out what works, figuring out what doesn't work. And that's also to be said for how you want to play. If you identify this super good strategy against a certain region, but you're not well equipped to play it, like you haven't really practiced it that much, it's not really going to work. You want to be 100% confident on not only what you think is going to be good against other teams, but what also is good for you. So I think there's a balance there that needs to be struck, but I definitely think that teams are going to take every single edge that they can to be the best. And I think that is the idea that you suggested of having like almost like a scout for other regions. I think that's an interesting idea that's it's employed in a lot of major sports, and I think it could be something that we see coming to Dota potentially very soon.
Yeah, I there was a point I wanted to make, but I can't exactly remember what it was.
Okay. Should we move on to the next topic?
Yeah. I think that'd be this would be a good time to. So yeah, Benji, what are you bringing to the table here?
Okay, so anyone who knows me knows I have a soft spot for Eastern Europe. It's my favorite region, but my question is Eastern Europe a one-team region? Now, let me sort of preface this a little bit. So Virtus Pro gone 7-0 in first DPC season, 7-0 in second DPC season. They are the only team to go 14-0 over both seasons of the DPC. I don't think any team has come particularly close in that regard. But, if you look at the other teams in Eastern Europe, Na'Vi, who were probably considered the second best team in Eastern Europe for many people, including myself, made some roster changes, didn't even qualify for this major. So the question is, are VP so far and away better than any other team that they are the only real big team in Eastern Europe? Beats, your thoughts?
So I want to posit something. I've been using that word a lot. I apologize.
You have, yeah.
A word gets into my vocabulary for like a day, and then it's the only thing my brain comes up with. So NA has a problem. I've always suggested NA has like a leadership problem where you have a lot of good players, but it lacks someone who can really bring them together. And I look at the players in Eastern Europe, and I almost think the same thing, where I see these names and I see these players that perform really well. I mean, they are super high MMR players. They are mechanically gifted. Is it as simple as a leadership problem, but there's a lack of leaders? What are your thoughts on that?
It could be. It could potentially be that. I think, obviously the big captain in Eastern Europe for a long time was Solo, obviously in that very successful VP squad. But now he is, down in Division 2 with no techies. Like, he's no longer at the upper echelon of Pro Dota. And, now we have Always Wanna Fly, who's been around for a long time, but he has just been kicked from Na'Vi. So, you don't really have those leaders that you had. I mean, there is Seneko, who has now been, actually, that kind of feeds into that point. Seneko has just left Gambit to go join Na'Vi. Not really a sign of a loyal captain when, after the first game of the season, he says, I don't think this team is going to work out. I want to go to Na'Vi. I don't think that reflects very well on the region. But that point can also be sort of countered by VP. This team is full of new faces. None of these players have, storied careers where they've been on major teams. These are all new players, and I think we sort of saw that lack of experience in the first major. But I think the point you made does sort of stand. There is a lack of leaders in Eastern Europe. There's a lack of sort of tenured players, and I think the point that I want to make is that Team Spirit, currently my favorite team, I want to point out I'm a huge Team Spirit fan, but they have not shown themselves on an international stage at all. A lot of these players have never played a major, or even a Valve event. So I'm going to be looking to them to be the second best team in Eastern Europe. If they don't perform at the major, I think we are pretty much nailed on that VP is the best team far and away in Eastern Europe, and it's not particularly close.
To me, it almost kind of reflects the two different team composition metas that have kind of arisen over the past couple of years of Dota, where there's the one strategy, and I would almost call this like the old strategy, where it's you get an old face, maybe like a puppy or like a PPD, and you have him captain the team. Could be Always Wanna Fly. That'd be another good example.
Mhm.
And you put him on with like maybe 4 newer players, maybe a couple established faces, and like 1 new player. But it's kind of like his team. Like it's kind of
Yeah.
their team. Compared to something like you see something like Liquid or this new Virtus Pro squad. I would even say like Quincy Crew's a good example of it, where you have this kind of team of maybe 5 newer players or 5 unestablished players, who it's kind of all of their team. And maybe there is like one captain, like you might see like Insania is the leader of Liquid, but it definitely feels like a team effort the entire time. You don't look at Liquid and say that's Insania's team, whereas you look at like
100%.
maybe Sad Boys or like Optic, and you would say those are PPD's teams. Those he obviously didn't play on Sad Boys this past season, but when he was, I think you would look at those teams and say that's PPD's team, or you look at Secret and you say that's Puppy's team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's... So, in Team Spirit, you've got this interesting dynamic where it's... So, you've got 4 new players. You've got, Yatoro, Toronto, Tokyo, Collapse, and Mirror, who are all fairly new players, not much experience. And they've got Maposhka, who people will recognize. He's been around for quite a while in the Eastern Europe scene. I'm not entirely sure... I'm not too familiar with Maposhka and how he's dealt with some of his teams, but it certainly doesn't feel like... he doesn't quite have that stature where it's, oh, this is Maposhka's team, or this is Maposhka leading, these 4 newer players, leading them to success. It seems like a lot more of a collaborative effort. So, I think that sort of style is not too present in Eastern Europe. And, when you had sort of the solo VP team in Eastern Europe, I don't feel like that was Solo's team. I think that team was definitely built around the talents of Ramses and no one. I don't think that was sort of similar to a PPD team or a Puppy team. So I don't think that style is particularly present in Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe it comes back. Always Wanna Fly is currently a free agent. He did say that he might want to retire very soon. So, that could be a possibility. But the possibility is always there for him to, maybe take on one of these newer teams if they don't feel confident in their captain, to maybe take him on and have him sort of manage one of these teams like PuckChamp, like, maybe I'm trying to think what the other teams are. Maybe a Team Unique, one of these teams who maybe doesn't have the experience and could benefit from a leader like Always Wanna Fly. I think that would be a really interesting proposition.
So if you were to suggest that Eastern Europe is a 1-team region, where does that leave the rest of the teams in the region? Would you say that there is kind of like a tier 2 spot in Eastern Europe, or would you say that like a team like Windstrike could be just as competitive as like Team Spirit could be next season?
So I think I'm definitely sort of what I'm getting at is that there's a huge drop off between VP and the next team. So I think because obviously, CIS is or Eastern Europe is a pretty competitive region. Like, for instance, Team Spirit, they had a very close series against VP. It's not like VP's, 2-0ing all these teams. It's not even close. They're winning 30-minute games. No, they are having close series against these, against, the best of the rest in Eastern Europe, who is currently Spirit, who is currently Gambit. But I think there is, when it comes to overall performance and when it comes to performance, I think particularly the performance against weaker teams, because that's always been, that's the mark of a good team. You beat the teams below you. And Team Spirit hasn't particularly done that. In the first season, they lost a couple of series against teams who didn't get any other wins in the season. They almost lost to Windstrike this season, who just got relegated. So I think VP are definitely better in that regard. And if they can deliver another pretty solid finish at this major, I think they will cement themselves as far and away the best team in Eastern Europe. And I think it's going to be up to teams like Spirit, teams like Gambit, while Na'Vi are sort of rebuilding. We'll see what happens with them. But it's going to be up to Gambit and Spirit to perform on an international level to make sure that, hey, we are competitive teams in Eastern Europe, and it's not just VP and everyone else.
It almost reminds me of the state people said North America was in for a while. And some people may even still suggest that it's in, where you have EG, who is constantly at the top, and then kind of everyone else is on a completely different playing field.
Hmm.
It's a little different though, because there's a lot more support in Eastern Europe as far as organizations go.
Yeah,
There's a lot
that's
more
true.
teams are get a lot more sponsorships. Even like tier 2 teams or div 2 teams you've seen pick up sponsorships. So it's an interesting situation they find themselves in Eastern Europe, where there is all this support for them. I think some players have mentioned that the support isn't as good as it immediately suggests, but I mean it's more than that exists in NA, and NA has kind of gotten out of this this situation. So I mean, I see no reason why Eastern Europe can't do the same thing.
I mean, I hope it doesn't come about. I hope Spirit do very, obviously as a Spirit fan, I hope they do very well at the major. But unfortunately, I could see a situation where Gambit don't make it through the wild card, Spirit don't make it through the group stage, and you have just VP as the sole Eastern Europe hope. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's definitely a possibility.
All right, now on to the last section of Aegis and Cheese, where we're going to be bringing you some prop bets, some fun predictions, some side bets on what we think is going to happen at the major. Benji, what you got for us first?
Okay, so let's start off with, I mean, maybe a little bit difficult to predict, but most picked or banned heroes. So let's do most picked first. I think pretty good place to start off with. So I have a list of 6 heroes that I made that I think are probably going to be potentially the most important. So I got Centaur, Mars, Snapfire, AA, Puck, and Tiny. What do you think about those ones?
So the 2 that I would take out immediately would be Mars and Puck. Although I think that they're heroes that are going to get picked a lot. I also think they're going to get banned quite a bit.
Yeah,
I think I don't think they meet that sweet spot that you need for like a most picked hero. Puck's going to get first phase banned a lot because although hit with tons of nerfs, doesn't really matter. It's still getting picked up way more than I think it should, and banned way more than I think it should. And then Mars is also like a good second phase ban that you'll see a lot. But Centaur, I think is a little. I think because of the nature of the hero having a little bit less natural counters, he's a good first phase pick. So I could definitely see him showing up a lot. Tiny is kind of also in that he's a good stable mid laner. He can play every role kind of. So you could see him getting first phased a lot, first phase picked. The heroes that I have, I actually only have 3. I have Darkseer, who's the sleeper pick that I think is going to show up at this event. People are going to be surprised by how good this hero is. I could be totally wrong, but I don't think he'll get banned. I think he'll sneak through a lot and show up and be a lot better than people anticipate. Second, Void Spirit.
Yeah.
Kind of a slept-on mid laner. Slept-on's not the right word. He's an all-arounder. Really, really popular in NA, but not banned out a whole lot because some games you just don't feel his presence, even though it's there, even though he's doing a lot. You don't look at the end of the game and say, oh, that Void Spirit was the reason we lost the game. So I don't think he gets banned out as much. Then my third pick is Bristleback. I'm not as sure about EU, but this has been a hero that has been on the up in NA throughout the season. A lot of buzz surrounding Bristleback the hero. Is he as popular around the world?
He's pretty popular in EU. I think I've seen a fair bit of him. I think it's the Ags. The Ags is just really good at the moment. It's so annoying to play against. Like you walk within attack range of this Bristleback and he just spams Q and W and die instantly.
Yeah.
But it did just get nerfed though, which is important. Not by much, but it did get nerfed a little bit. So who are you settling on for your most picked hero?
I want to say Darkseer, but I'm not going to say Darkseer. So, and I think people might think I'm silly, but I am going to say Void Spirit.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. So, I think so. It's a very tough pick to navigate. I think Centaur and Mars. I think being cores, I don't think they're going to get picked that often. I think they're actually going to get banned and picked at a pretty high rate. So, I don't think they're going to be either the most picked or most banned. They will be contested a lot, but not most picked or most banned. I'm deciding between. I think Snapfire just got nerfed, didn't she? And pretty hard. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with AA. Interesting pick. Not something that's been incredibly popular over the last, I don't know, year or two, but it has been coming back a lot recently. And I think mostly that is because of the Ice Vortex. It did just get nerfed. I know it just got nerfed. I don't think it got nerfed by that much.
I think pre-patch, it had something like a 57 or 58% win rate in high-level play.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
It's pretty good.
Like...
Yeah, and it was getting picked a lot as well. Like, one of the most picked heroes in... one of the most picked heroes, period. So, I'm going to go with that, the AA. And then for most banned hero... I'm gonna throw a bit of a curveball. Maybe not that much of a curveball. I'm going to go with Broodmother.
Yeah,
now, I know that Insatiable Hunger just got nerfed, but here's my thing. I'm going to run you through my thinking here. All right, no one can dispute that China is the strongest region currently. I think that I'm pretty safe in saying that. Now, Chinese teams absolutely love Brood. They've been picking and banning it entire DPC. And I think that teams from all other regions, and even teams in China, are going to look at other Chinese teams and go, okay, they played Broodmother. I do not want to play against Broodmother because it changes the way you have to play the game, and it's just so annoying. I hate this hero. So I think Brood is going to get banned the most. And I think I'm not 100% sure about that. It's not like, I'm very sure that Brood's going to be the most banned, but I think it could happen. I think it's not even likely, but I think it is in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, you stole mine, you fiend.
Oh no!
So,
no, we're united on this.
Yeah, I think we're united on Broodmother. I think despite the nerfs, and pretty much every single game I've watched, where a Broodmother has been picked, it's been the same story every time. Where it's like, oh no, it gets to the end of the draft and it's just, oh no, they forgot to ban Brood, and then it gets picked and the game's just kind of over. So. I think it's gonna get banned simply because it makes your draft easier. It just makes your draft way easier. It's something you don't have to worry about anymore. So yeah, we're united. So next up we've got will there be a mega creep comeback? And I'll take this one first. I think the answer is I'm gonna give like a 90% yes. And this was kind of something that wasn't as frequent back in the day. Mega creep comebacks were like one in a million. But now
that's why the EG game is so famous, right?
Yeah, it was
because it was so rare.
Yeah, and nowadays, I mean, you pretty much see them. I think I could be wrong, but NA had a mega creep comeback. It may have even had two in the season. I'm not sure if any other regions did. But it's not totally out of the realm. I can't
recall any off the top of my head. But yeah, I agree.
But even in that game, it wasn't like the news of that game wasn't that the other team came back from mega creeps. It was that they came back from such a huge gold deficit. So at this point, with level 30 talents, like getting the entire skill tree, like there's so many things that can happen at the end of the game. So many resources teams can still get in those like supreme late game scenarios that I think make it easier to defend against mega creeps. So yeah, I definitely see it as a possibility, a high possibility.
Okay, so I'm gonna take the contrarian stance here. I'm gonna say there is not gonna be a mega creep comeback at this major, and my reasoning, half the reasoning is I don't want to just agree with you the whole time. You know, we want to have some discourse here, but. Second reasoning is that these are the best teams in the world, and I'm going to bank on the fact that best teams in the world can probably close out against mega creeps, and if not, can close the game out before mega creeps even come about. So that's my very thin reasoning for not agreeing with you there.
Yeah, and not to make this one go on too long, but the other thing that I would add to that is that in a lot of these high-level games nowadays, I've noticed that pushing high ground this patch is so scary that teams will wait until they have a complete win condition to do so. They will wait out the map until they feel it is the exact time that they can close out the game. So, I mean, that could work in your favor there.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. Next up, length of longest game. I guess we'll go with like 10-minute time frames. So we'll start from 50 to 59 minutes and then sort of go up from there. So 60 to 69, nice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have here? I guess it's a bit more of a punt.
Yeah, I would say 70 to 79 minutes would probably be my time frame for longest game. I feel like that's the safe pick.
Yeah.
Because you usually
I was
going
gonna
to
say like that's the same pick.
in like the group stage. But it just doesn't seem like this patch really has a lot of them. A lot of like super long games.
Yeah.
However, I will say, kind of to counter my point, you'll probably bring this up. If there is a long game, the long games this patch feel long. Yeah. So
yeah.
You go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with 60 to 69. For one reason, and I think there aren't many reasons that you can think of for long games, but my reason is tier 5 items. Some of them are completely broken.
Mm-hmm.
Like in some games, you can get a ballista, you can get an apex, you can get an ex machina, and it can win you the game. So I think if we get past that 60-minute mark, the likelihood is that it's not going to take more than 10 minutes to close out the game. And I think 60-minute games are rare as it is.
Yeah.
I think the possibility that one goes over that point, you get 4 tier 5 items per team, and they don't win the game. I think that's fairly unlikely. So I'm going to go with that. I could see, but what you mentioned earlier about teams not wanting to push high ground until they have every single advantage, I think that's probably could work in your favor there. You get tier 5 items, but you still don't feel like you want that extra Roche, or you want them to commit their buybacks, things like that. You want mega creeps or whatever. So I could see that one going either way, but that's my thought on 60 to 70 minutes.
Yeah, I think something I wanted to bring up was so that EEG versus Quincy Crew game that felt like a really long game that ended with the tiny toss bug winning the game for Quincy Crew. One of the things that kind of happened in that game to lead it up to that point was that you had this standoff where both teams were really on an equal playing field. It was late game.
Yeah.
It was one of the most exciting games I've seen, where you just have both teams kind of just skirmishing at each other like every 5 minutes, but it's very slight.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll engage and disengage very quickly, and I don't think that's unique to those two teams. I think in high level Dota, that is something that you're going to start to see more and more. Is kind of these situations where both teams are kind of at the similar level net worth experience wise, and just don't want to do anything. They're just too scared to do anything.
Yep.
All right, moving on. We got, will there be a techies pick at the event?
Okay,
go ahead.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna say 100% there's gonna be a techies pick. I think this DPC season particularly, I've seen so many techies, and that's in, I think mostly where I've seen it is Eastern Europe and NA. I think those two regions have been noted for having techies picked. So I haven't seen any techies from teams that are going to the major, but I think there are so many games, and we're seeing we're seeing more and more that teams are trying to outdo each other in the draft and have that gotcha pick, and I think techies could be one of those. I mean, it changes the way you got to play the game.
Yeah.
If you're against the techies, it's not a Dota game; it's a techies game. You're constantly worrying about mines, and pushing becomes almost impossible unless you have like a gem and a spectre with an Aegis or something. So, I think more than likely we're going to see a techies, even though it is a major.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. More teams have been pulling it out, and I would say the thing that shields this pick from something like a Meepo pick, is that a Meepo pick, when you see it, the game's already over. Usually if a Meepo is picked nowadays, the draft is set up in such a way where that Meepo can just take over the game. Whereas with techies, it's a bit. He doesn't need the perfect draft. He can kind of fit in anywhere. It's just a matter of, does a team want to do it? So I think for that reason, we will definitely see a techies pick. I'm sorry to not bring the heat and bring some more discourse here, but it just seems to be the way of the beast. So
I just gotta say, I hate techies. By the way, I like watching it, playing against it. No, just leave me out on that. Thank you.
The first time I saw a techies game was when I was a big Cloud9 fan. And they were at DAC, the China TI it was called, and they were going up against Secret, and Secret, I'm pretty sure Secret, it was when they were against Secret, Secret pulled it out against them, and it was the first time I'd seen techies on a main stage game, and I think they did it just to humiliate C9, because C9 did not look the same after that game. Like, C9 looked like a strong team going into that game, and then after that game, they looked terrible. So,
whose techies was it? Was it back in the days of Kuroki? Because I know Kuroki, he played the techies.
No, it was post Kuroki Secret. Let me look it up.
I see.
It was DAC 2015. So yeah, we can take a little breather here before we go on to the next one, because I'm really curious what this game was.
DAC 2015. I'm trying to think when that would be. So that was like TI5. Yapsol probably wasn't there yet.
Yeah, I think it was in the group stage. Cloud9 actually did go on to still do okay.
But yeah,
I need the cross.
But what you said about the techie sort of, it affects you, you know.
Yeah.
If you play if you lose to techies, you're not going to go into the next game feeling, all right, we're just gonna, brush that game off. We're gonna go and win the game. Oh no, so that was Kuroki. Kuroki was still on the team at that point, so maybe it was a Kuroki techies.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I have it right.
But no, what you said about, it affects you mentally when you lose to techies. You're like, oh my god, we just lost to techies. Did this seriously just happen? Yeah, and you also get tilted during the game because you're constantly getting blown up by mines and stuff. It's a real mental warfare comes with picking techies.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't that event. But yeah, I definitely remember Cloud9 went up against the techies, and then as soon as they lost to it, they looked awful. I'm gonna have to look into what that was, and Will send you it so maybe you can put it up on the screen. This was the game. So yeah, okay. Moving on. So which teams do you think will be eliminated from the group stage?
Ooh. So I think this one's, I want to say it's tough, but it's not really. So I can definitely see, as much as I love them, Team Spirit, I think it's fairly likely that they don't manage to get out of the group stage. As for the other team, I think it's a little bit less clear. I think most likely is that you're going to have two really strong teams coming out of the wildcard. I actually don't think either of the wildcard teams are going to be going out in the group stage. So I think TNC is probably the most likely with Spirit. Those are my two teams that I would have earmarked. If I had to pick, which I do have to pick because this is the predictions part of the podcast, I'm going to go with TNC and Team Spirit, unfortunately.
Yeah, I like what you said. I think the aspect of wildcards kind of having some momentum going into the group stage is going to be a big factor. So I agree with Team Spirit. They're a team that I have going out. But the other one, and this is going to be controversial. I know you're going to think I'm going to say EG. I'm not going to say EG. I'm not going to do my boys dirty like that. But I am going to say, and as much as I like the team, I am going to say Team Liquid. Because this is a team that sometimes struggles. We've seen it happen. They fail to get off the ground. Similar to EG, fail to get off the ground. And the rest of the event just doesn't look the same from them. So you really think Samael in his first major back in who knows how long is just gonna lose in group stages? I thought you were the NA guy. I thought you believed in your guy, Samael. You're forcing me. I'm being forced to pick. And out of all of these teams, if you were going to ask which team looks like it could choke the most, I'm sorry, it's Team Liquid. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I disagree, but I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't feel good about it. But yeah, that's how it is. All right. My pick. The final prediction, got to be done. Who is winning the Animajor beats? Quincy Crib. Give me a name. Quincy. Okay, is that your NA bias? Or are you seriously saying? Look, I don't care if it's NA bias. Sir, I think Quincy disagree heavily. They look good. What are you gonna say, Virtus Pro? This is what you said last time. No, I'm not gonna say Virtus Pro. So, I think it would be stupid not to pick a Chinese team. So I'm gonna go with. I'm debating between all of them really. I feel like all of these Chinese teams have a pretty good shot of winning it. But I'm gonna settle on LGD. I think you convinced me. Third place last time. They're in a group stage. I think they're ready to make the jump and become
the We Play and a major champions.
Okay. I mean, if you were to give me a team that wasn't North American that would win the major, because obviously it's going to be EG versus Quincy Crew.
Oh yeah. That is the. I thought we were operating with that.
Yeah, that's the guarantee. It would. My pick would probably be PSG LGD. I love that team. I think that those are some of the best players in the world on their positions. But not only that, just as a team, they look very consistent. So, yeah. If we had to put on the seal of approval on a team that both of us agree on, I think it would be LGD. And because of that, we have cursed them from getting out of the group stage.
So they've got the Aegis and Cheese seal of approval. Is that what we call it?
Yeah. We'll put it up on the screen. Stamped, approved. PSG LGD.
It's going to be hilarious when we get to our group stage episodes and they've already been eliminated.
we can just make it so that we like come on screen and we look very tired and broken.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Well, that's about it for our first episode, I think. Just about wraps it up.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you've made it this far, I am 4Beats. I'm here with Benji, and this has been the Aegis and Cheese. Be sure to tune in to our stream after the group stages are done. We'll have an official date on our Twitter accounts, I'm sure. We're going to go over what happened during the group stage and kind of give some predictions on the event going forward and some thoughts. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Okay, so, my Twitter handle will be below my my video camera feed. But for those of you listening in the audio realm, it's at Benjamin, that's spelled at BENJ0MIN.
All right, and for me, it'll also be at the bottom here, but it is 4Beats with 2 S's. So yeah, that is me. Thank you all for listening, and good luck to all the teams at the major. I mean, I'm really excited.